Hey guys, it's CalmBee, and we're going to be talking about replicators today. I know when I say replicator, I'm not just going to be doing this, but before I get into the video, if you have not yet hit my support code, you can either go to my profile, hit support, or you could type in code CalmBee for the Rec Room store, and it would help me out greatly and help me with creating future tutorials that you guys want to see. But without further ado, let's go jump into replicators and show you what it's all about. Alright, so I'm doing this on screen mode, honestly, because it's just easier with the circuits. So I'm going to take out my maker pen and I'm going to start by creating just a simple cube. However, again, you just want to go to your palette and hit your shape. I do want to make a few adjustments. Make sure your snapping is set to 1 and your snapping up here is set to grid world space. Let's go spawn that cube in. Sometimes Rec Room grid does not work perfectly, but we'll do our best. Okay, there we go. We got our cube, and you'll notice if I move it, it moves in 1 increments, so that's awesome. Now next up, we're going to add some circuits. We're going to take out our maker pen again, and we're going to do a search for the replicator. There we go, we have our replicator, and let's just spawn that down. We're also going to take out another replicator item, and there are a bunch of different new beta chips, but I'm just going to go over some of the ones that I don't know, I find the most useful, at least for this purpose. So we're going to take out replicator spawn new object. We're also going to take out a button because that's how we're going to execute. Let's put that up there. Let's also take out a get position. And we'll just spawn that there. Let's take out a vector. And we'll need a few of these, but for now we'll just use the vector create and put that there. We'll take out an if chip, and we'll take out a delay. So we're gonna make it so that every like 0.1 seconds a new cube will be formed, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Lastly, at least for now, we're going to take out a variable, and this one is going to be a vector variable. And there we go, vector3 variable, and we'll spawn 2 of those in. Let's just clone. You might want to take your snapping off now because you don't really need it at the moment. You only needed it for the cube. Alright, so we're going to make sure that when we spawn the cube, and we're going to spawn it 100 times, and it's going to shoot forward and go up and down and all around, but we want it to be random. So in order to do that, we're going to pull out some random events. We're going to pick out the random integer, and the reason why we want an integer is because we want to stick to the 111 grid. And let's just click out of there. Okay, we'll want to actually have 3 of these because we're going to look at the X, Y, and the Z axis. We're going to need a vector split. And let's take out, again, we just want 1 of these, but then we're going to want some int to floats, because after we get our random integer, we want to convert it to a float value so that we can feed it into the new position. So let's move this over, and we'll just line this up. Alright. Then we'll need an add chip because we'll want to add it to the last position. And we'll want to duplicate that again 2 more times. So let's do that. And then we'll need a vector3 create again to put it all together. And we'll want to get a Rec Room get first with tag, because we're going to want to talk about what exactly we want to replicate, and one last, get position. All right, we'll hook this up in just a moment, and I'll explain to you how it works and what everything I just brought into into our scene actually does. But before I do, let's just unhook the items that accidentally got hooked up to each other. All right, before I start hooking this up and explain to you why exactly I spawned in all these chips, we're going to just move this vector create down just slightly. We're also going to rename our vector variable over here, and I'll just call it vector3 cube position. And we'll hit submit, and again I'll rename this one as well. Let's go to our button, and when we press our button, we're gonna go to this if else statement and say, you know, if we have a cube already, we want to spawn the next one and like where we're gonna want it. But if we don't already have a spawn cube, where do we want to start it? So let's go ahead and say, well, if we haven't yet spawned anything and this is false, then we'll want to start our first cube in a specific position. In this case, I'm just going to start at 0, 0, 0, and let's go ahead and link that to our vector3 cube position. And I just renamed these vectors, and we'll say they'll go to our else, because that'll be if it's false. But if we replicated an object and it was successful, and we'll link that again to our if then what do I want that position to be? I want it to be the object that we just spawned, get that position, and that will be our new vector. So let's just link up that. And so basically, again, this is just saying, if we don't have a starting cube, where do we want to start our cube? We're going to start it at xyz of 0, 0, 0. If we do have a cube that's been replicated, that we want that last object and we want to get its position so that we can figure out where to spawn the next object. All right, so now we could also link up our target. So what's our target for the replicator next object? That's just going to be this replicator. So it's saying which replicator do you want to use. And then all we need is our position and orientation, which we'll calculate up here. So up here, we're going to say whether or not we spawned the cube or we need to spawn our first cube. We're going to pick a random integer from 0 to 1. Let's link those continuously so they all get executed at once. We want that integer to be converted to a float. The float then goes over to the add. And what do we want to add this 0 to or 1 integer to? We want to add it to the vector 3 that we have, our last vector 3. And in this case, we'll just link that up to our vector split. And we'll take the x, the y, and the z. And we'll add either 0 or 1 to each of those numbers. And then we'll take each of these sums, recreate a new vector 3, and take that as our position. Right, so I just realized I was about to set up the rotation, but instead of get rotation, I put get position. So let's delete that and go to get rotation. And let's spawn that in. And what do we want to get the rotation of? We want to get the rotation of our cube. You'll also have to add a tag to the cube because it's not going to, we won't know what exactly we're checking the rotation of. So I just added a tag over here to our cube. And now that we have the rotation, let's go ahead and link up the quaternion to orientation. And then we want to take that last random integer and spawn a new object. However, if we spawn one object, that's great, but we're gonna want to spawn, in this case, 100 cubes. And in order to do that, we'll have to say when that spawn is complete, after 0.1 seconds, we're going to start this process all over again. Okay? So let's go ahead and configure our replicator. We'll need to set it to the object that we want, and in this case, let's see, this is container 133, so let's link it to container 113, or 133 I should say. We want 100 copies of it, and I think that's all we need for this instance. And you'll notice that the cube now is under the replicator and it's moved over to the center, and now we're gonna go give it a try. So if I press the button, oh, here it goes. You'll notice that it's going, and it'll stop once it hits 100 cubes. And honestly, like, this is pretty neat because it's just like the first step in creating like randomized terrain or whatever you really want to replicate. All right, but what if you want to take it one step further, and instead of just creating randomized 1 cube objects, you want to maybe lay out 1 row of the terrain? Let's just go ahead and adjust some of these random integers. We'll want to add 1 to our x-axis. We could go a range of -1 to 1 on our y-axis, and then we don't want to add anything to our z-axis. And you'll see when I hit the button what will happen. It's going to, well, it's clipping through the floor, but you'll notice that it goes in a very concise row, up and down and up and down. And you can see how this could be interesting, and how this could just be the start of maybe an AI generated terrain or randomized terrain. I did notice that our onSpawnComplete is still active, and that's because we have it going infinitely even though there's only 100 cubes. So let's go ahead and fix that. We can say, you'll see that we have our max count already spawned. Let's go ahead and figure out how many replicated objects do we have. So we could go to replicator, get active objects. Let's add this down here, and we want to get which objects. Let's get the objects of our replicator. Okay, so we just click that to the replicator. You'll see that we have 100 objects spawned. Let's go to list get count and spawn that over here, and we'll have an if function, and we'll say if equals, or we could say greater than or equal to. Sometimes it's just easier with logic. We'll say if our count is greater than or equal to 100, then we want to stop this whole loop. If not, continue it. So let's just move our if statement down and move this over. And now instead of going into this circular loop, we'll say on complete. If we hit our max, then nothing. If not, we'll want to continue that loop cycle. So let's again go over and just reset the room and click the button again. Now it's going to create that terrain, and once we hit 100, it should turn off. It should turn off this circuit loop. Let's see if that happens. There we go. So it just shut off because we hit 100 cubes going in a row, and that's pretty neat. Again, this is just the start of something that you could continue to build on. So just to go through this once more, we have our cube and our replicator, which is over here. We want to spawn the next cube. And where do we want to spawn the next cube? Well, it just depends. Do we have a cube, or are we going to go off the last one spawned? That's what we have over here with our vectors. And where do we want our next cube to spawn? This is where you could play around with it and sort of put it on whichever axes you want, the X, Y, and Z. You could add to it, you could subtract, but for now I just had a random integer set up. And that's where you're going to want your next cube to be. If you have a cube that you already set up and you know the rotation, then you could just get that rotation and link it up to your next object. And once you hit the max of whatever you set this max replicator to be, it's going to turn off the circuit. If not, it's going to continue to loop until all your cubes are created. I hope this video helped you out, especially in understanding how to use the replicator and what it does. I'm really excited to see what kind of games are going to be coming out just based off of this one object, because honestly there's so many possibilities, and especially with like AI and randomizing different games, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity. If you did use it, let me know in the comments what you used it for. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and use my support code CalmBee if you like this video and you want to see more tutorials. I'll see you guys in the next one.